also freely available to members. Question number 4, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, will the government propose any measures to restrict the sale of New Zealand farmland or residential land to foreign companies or persons?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're certainly not going to restrict Australians from buying homes after they migrate to New Zealand. The government has already restricted overseas investment in sensitive land and residential land. We made changes to the regulations in 2010, which were reflected in a directive letter to the Overseas Investment Office. We believe these changes struck the appropriate balance between the ministerial flexibility to consider a wider range of issues when assessing overseas investment, at the same time as providing clarity and certainty for potential investors. I would note that under this government, the amount of sensitive land approved for sale to overseas buyers has been less than half what it was in the last 5 years of the previous Labor Greens government. I'd also note that the OECD assesses our overseas investment regime as now one of the more restrictive in the developed world.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he consider that China has any lessons to teach New Zealand regarding foreign ownership, given that China protects its economic interests through restricting land sales to foreign buyers?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member may be more familiar than I am with the tenets of communism, but in China, private individuals didn't own land until recently, only the government did, so even the Chinese couldn't buy land in China. But I am a bit surprised to find that the Greens only ever get this excited about foreign ownership when it involves the Chinese, who happen to have a much lower number of consents than Australia, the UK, Germany, Switzerland and I think Sweden.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he have any concern that more than 1 in 10 homes in Auckland is purchased offshore, and that, according to BNZ economist Tony Alexander, this figure is only set to increase?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I know the member's been conducting his own investigation into these issues by visiting the home of kin.com, a well-known foreign investor in Auckland real estate. I can't confirm the member's 1 in 10 number. The BNZ survey that I saw said that it was about six houses in every 100 that are foreign owned or foreign purchased, and about a quarter of those are being purchased by Chinese, which means 1.5 houses in every 100 may be being purchased by people who real estate agents think are residents of China.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When will he and his government consider there is a problem? When 1 in 5 homes is purchased by offshore buyers, or will it be when 1 in 4 homes is purchased by offshore buyers? At what point will he acknowledge that there is a problem?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we don't have the same problem about them being foreign as the Greens do. What we have a problem with is the very high cost of housing in New Zealand to New Zealanders. And that is why and all the analysis shows that the fundamental driver of the high cost of housing is not the Greens' friends from China. It is the Greens' friends in the planning departments of our city councils who insist on blocking new development of new housing. So the Greens are a much bigger enemy of affordability of housing in New Zealand than the Chinese have ever been.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he consider that an increasing interest from offshore buyers in purchasing residential property in Auckland is increasing the price of housing for New Zealand home buyers, or does he think that this big increase in demand from offshore is having no effect? It's a special kind of market where a big increase in demand has no effect on prices.
Honourable Bill
Mr.
English.
Speaker, it's not obvious that there is a big increase in demand from offshore buyers. There's some anecdotal evidence that that is the case, and I know it's certainly believed by some people, but it's yet to be established. The fundamental driver of the increase in housing is restrictive planning policy, which means that when there's more demand, whether it's foreign or, in this case, New Zealanders who've stopped migrating and are staying home, and more people who are arriving in New Zealand as migrants, when those factors of demand are rising, that the supply cannot react to it. All around the world, restrictive planning laws mean higher prices and more volatile prices, and the Greens back that kind of policy. They should be backing the government on getting rid of that sort of policy if they're really concerned about locking low and middle income New Zealanders out of the housing market.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russel Norman.
Does he agree with Auckland House auctioneer Adam Wang that our ambiguous laws around capital gains tax are assisting the boom in the foreign buy-up in our housing stock? And does he have any plans to deal with the fact that the capital gains tax exemption in New Zealand is part of the problem for driving up house prices?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, all of those issues have been looked at by various inquiries, by the Productivity Commission, by policy advisors, and it's possible that any one of them have some influence on the price. This government, though, has focused on the biggest influence and the most pervasive one, and that is restriction of supply. And it's hard to understand why the Greens support housing planning policies which have the effect of driving up the wealth of the leafy suburbs at the expense of middle-income and low-income New Zealanders. And I think that if the Greens were really concerned about equity in New Zealand and affordability of housing, they'd be supporting the government policies, not the Labor Party's policies.
Question number 5, Colin King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.